I was sitting at my construction site desk when my phone rang with the worst news imaginable. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, almost casual as he delivered the bomb that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Detective Morrison from Denver Metro Police was calling to inform me that my brother Derek had crashed my car while driving drunk, seriously injuring a mother and her 2 young children. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. 20 minutes later, my parents called, demanding that I confess to the crime and go to prison because Derek's future was too important to waste. My name is Orville and I'm 28 years old. Growing up in suburban Denver, Colorado, I learned early that love in my family came with conditions I could never meet. I was the forgotten middle child sandwiched between Derek, who was 30 and could do no wrong, and Angela, who was 26, and treated like royalty. While my siblings basked in the warm glow of parental approval, I existed in the shadows watching resources. Attention and affection flow around me like water around a stone. The pattern started when we were kids. Derek wanted to play Little League baseball, and within a week he had top-of-the-line equipment, private coaching sessions, and a custom uniform with his name embroidered in gold thread. When I expressed interest in joining the soccer team, my parents handed me a $20 bill and told me to find something at the thrift store. I ended up with cleats that were 2 sizes too big and shin guards held together with electrical tape. High school brought more of the same systematic inequality. Derek struggled with algebra, so my parents immediately hired a private tutor at $60 per hour 3 times a week. When his grades improved, they celebrated with a brand new Mustang for his 16th birthday. Angela discovered a passion for dance, and suddenly our family budget included monthly payments for ballet classes, jazz classes, contemporary dance workshops, and competition fees that ran into the thousands. She got professional headshots, custom costumes, and weekend trips to dance competitions in other states. Meanwhile, I was stocking shelves at Morrison's grocery store every day after school and all weekend long, earning minimum wage to pay for my own basic necessities. I bought my own school supplies, paid for my own lunch, and when I needed a car to get to work, I saved every penny for 8 months to buy a beaten-up Honda Civic with 160,000 miles on it. My parents' contribution to my transportation needs was exactly $0 and 0 cents. College applications revealed the depth of the financial favoritism with crystal clarity. Derek chose to attend Colorado State University's business program, and my parents eagerly wrote checks totaling $42,000 per year for tuition, room, board, meal plans, and spending money. They even bought him a laptop, paid for fraternity dues, and sent him monthly allowances for entertainment. Angela decided she wanted to study communications at the University of Colorado Boulder, and once again the family checkbook opened wide. Her education cost $38,000 annually, but she also received funding for sorority membership spring break trips, study abroad programs, and internships in major cities. When it came time for my higher education, I was handed a stack of financial aid forms and told to figure it out myself. I spent 2 years at Front Range Community College working full-time at a warehouse while carrying a full course load. Every textbook came from the used section, every meal was packed from home, and every assignment was completed on a computer at the library because I couldn't afford my own. I transferred to a state school for my final 2 years, graduated with $32,000 in student loan debt, and walked across the stage to collect my diploma while my family was vacationing in Hawaii. Derek's post-college life continued the pattern of endless financial support, disguised as investment opportunities. When he announced his intention to start a boutique marketing consultancy, my parents immediately provided $65,000 in startup capital. The business lasted exactly 6 months before Derek lost interest and moved on to other pursuits, but nobody mentioned repaying the loan. Angela's dreams of becoming a social media influencer received similar enthusiastic funding. My parents provided $45,000 for professional photography, video equipment, website development, and promotional campaigns that were supposed to build her personal brand. I kept meticulous mental records of every dollar that flowed to my siblings over the years. Derek received direct financial gifts totaling $123,000, plus investments and bailouts, bringing his total to $185,000. Angela's tally reached $175,000 when you included her education business ventures and lifestyle subsidies. My total family financial support throughout my entire life could be calculated quickly and painfully, $0 My mother, Patricia, perfected the art of passive-aggressive manipulation, always finding ways to make my self-reliance sound like a character flaw. When I couldn't afford to join family vacations, she would sigh deeply and say things like, "I just wish Orville cared about spending time with us," as if my absence was a choice rather than a financial impossibility. When Derek needed money for rent because he'd spent his paycheck on entertainment, she'd call it helping family through a rough patch. When I mentioned struggling to pay bills, she'd offer advice about budgeting and personal responsibility. My father, Richard, approached favoritism from a business perspective, constantly evaluating his children's return on investment. He believed Derek showed promise as an entrepreneur, and Angela had potential for social media success, making them worthy of continued financial backing. In his mind, I was already self-sufficient and therefore didn't require additional resources. He never seemed to recognize that my self-sufficiency was born from necessity, not choice, and that his other children might have developed similar independence if they'd been forced to sink or swim. Derek had grown into a charming manipulator who could talk his way out of any situation and into any wallet. He possessed an uncanny ability to make his problems sound temporary while making his potential sound limitless. His substance abuse issues were always framed as stress responses to the pressure of success, and his financial irresponsibility was characterized as the inevitable cost of taking entrepreneurial risks. He'd learned to weaponize his charm using emotional appeals and future promises to keep the money flowing. Angela had developed into a self-absorbed social media addict who measured her worth in likes, followers, and brand partnerships. She genuinely believed that her online presence constituted a legitimate career path, and that family financial support was simply an investment in her eventual success. Her Instagram feed showcased a lifestyle of expensive restaurants, designer clothing, and exotic travel destinations, all funded by parents who saw her post as evidence of their daughter's sophisticated taste and social media savvy. I was working construction when the first major warning sign appeared in my credit report. Somehow I had $15,000 in credit card debt spread across 3 cards I'd never opened. The addresses on the accounts were slightly different from mine, just transposed apartment numbers and modified zip codes. But the social security number was definitely mine. When I called the credit card companies to dispute the charges, they informed me that all the purchases had been made with physical cards and proper identification. The revelation hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Derek had been using my identity to open credit cards probably for months, running up debt in my name, while I struggled to save money for my upcoming wedding. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the betrayal cut deeper than any previous family slight. This wasn't just favoritism or neglect. This was active theft of my financial future. 6 months before the car incident, my fiancée Sarah and I were planning our wedding on a shoestring budget, while my family made sure we knew exactly how inadequate our celebration would be. Sarah worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital Colorado, and together we'd managed to save $8,000 for our special day. We found beauty in simplicity and meaning in the commitment we were making to each other. But my family saw only an embarrassment to their social standing. We chose the Riverside Community Center for our ceremony and reception, a lovely venue with hardwood floors, large windows overlooking the South Platte River, and enough space for 50 guests. The rental fee was $400 for the entire day, leaving us plenty of budget for catering, flowers, and photography. Sarah's cousin played guitar during the ceremony, her aunt made our wedding cake, and we hired a local DJ who specialized in small celebrations. Every detail was planned with care and love, even if it wasn't expensive. The contrast with Derek's destination wedding couldn't have been more stark. 2 years earlier, my parents had spent $47,000 sending 40 guests to Cancun, Mexico, for a 3-day celebration that included welcome dinners, poolside receptions, and beachfront ceremonies. Professional photographers captured every moment, videographers created a documentary-style film, and Derek and his bride honeymooned in Europe for 2 weeks on the family dime. The wedding was featured in a local lifestyle magazine with a 6-page spread showcasing the elaborate decorations and celebrity-level entertainment. Angela's engagement party alone had cost $12,000 at the Brown Palace Hotel in downtown Denver. Crystal chandeliers illuminated tables draped with silk linens, professional florists created towering centerpieces, and a string quartet provided background music while guests enjoyed champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The guest list included local society figures, business associates, and Instagram influencers who helped document the event for social media. Angela wore a custom gown that cost more than my entire wedding budget. When my mother Patricia learned about our community center venue, she couldn't hide her disappointment. During family dinner, she suggested that Sarah and I should consider postponing our wedding until we could afford to do it properly. She worried aloud about what their friends would think when they discovered the location, wondering if they'd assume the family was experiencing financial difficulties. She offered to help us find a more appropriate venue, which really meant she wanted us to wait until she felt comfortable contributing financially. My father, Richard, was even more direct in his disapproval. He questioned why Sarah would agree to such a modest celebration, wondering aloud if she understood the importance of making a good impression on business associates and community members. He suggested that a proper wedding was an investment in our future, creating networking opportunities and establishing our place in society. When I pointed out that we were paying for everything ourselves, he responded that perhaps we weren't ready for marriage if we couldn't afford the associated responsibilities. Derek found endless entertainment in our wedding plans, making jokes about discount receptions whenever the topic arose at family gatherings. He'd tell stories about his own wedding's luxury accommodations and international guest list, always managing to work in comments about people who settle for less because they don't understand quality. His wife would join in sharing Instagram posts from expensive weddings with captions about relationship goals and doing things right the first time. Angela took her mockery to social media, posting photos from glamorous weddings with captions about people who have community center weddings and when your expectations don't match your budget. She created Instagram stories featuring expensive venues with commentary about what real weddings looked like, making sure her followers understood the difference between authentic celebrations and budget compromises. Her posts always generated dozens of comments from friends agreeing that wedding venues reflected the couple's priorities and values. The actual wedding day arrived with crisp October weather and golden afternoon light streaming through the community center windows. Sarah looked absolutely radiant in her grandmother's vintage dress, which had been carefully altered to fit perfectly. Her family embraced me warmly, treating me like a son from the moment they arrived. Bob and Linda, Sarah's parents, were hardworking people who owned a small plumbing business and understood the value of building something meaningful with your own hands. Pastor Williams, who ministered at the community center's chapel, performed a beautiful ceremony that focused on commitment, partnership, and the strength that comes from facing life's challenges together. The vows we exchanged brought tears to guests' eyes, and the intimate setting allowed everyone to feel included in our joy. Sarah's cousin played acoustic guitar versions of our favorite songs, creating a soundtrack that perfectly captured our relationship's quiet strength and deep affection. My family arrived 23 minutes late, walking in during the processional and creating a disruption that drew attention from the ceremony. They sat in the back row checking their phones and whispering among themselves while Pastor Williams spoke about love and commitment. Patricia wore an expression of resigned suffering, as if attending the wedding was a personal sacrifice she was making for family unity. Richard kept checking his watch and looking toward the exit, clearly calculating the minimum amount of time required for appearances. The reception showcased everything wonderful about celebrating with people who truly care about you. Sarah's family filled the dance floor, her coworkers shared hilarious nursing stories, and our college friends created an atmosphere of genuine celebration. The community center's caterer served comfort food that reminded everyone of family gatherings, and the cake was decorated with fresh flowers from Sarah's aunt's garden. Every speech focused on our relationship's authenticity and the bright future we were building together. My parents spent the entire reception comparing every detail to Derek's wedding, pointing out the differences in table settings, entertainment quality, and guest accommodations. They made no effort to hide their disapproval, critiquing the music selection, questioning the catering choices, and wondering aloud why we hadn't provided welcome bags for out-of-town guests. Angela took photos of the decorations with barely concealed smirks, clearly planning to share them on social media as examples of budget wedding disasters. Derek brought a flask and steadily consumed alcohol throughout the evening, becoming increasingly loud and inappropriate as the night progressed. When it came time for toast, he stumbled to the microphone and delivered a rambling speech about different people having different priorities and appreciating the simple things in life when you can't afford the complex ones. His words were slurred, his timing was terrible, and his message was insulting, but my parents just smiled and nodded as if he was being charming. The only family member who genuinely celebrated with us was my cousin Marcus, who had also experienced the family's systematic favoritism firsthand. Marcus understood what it meant to be overlooked and undervalued, and he made a point of telling everyone how proud he was of what Sarah and I had accomplished together. He stayed until the very end of the reception, helping us clean up and load our gifts into the car. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Derek cornered me near the gift table with desperation replacing his earlier smugness. His carefully maintained facade cracked completely as he revealed the truth about his financial situation. The money our parents had given him for various business ventures had been lost to gambling debts, and he now owed dangerous people significant amounts that he couldn't repay. He begged me to be family and help him out of the situation, promising to pay me back as soon as his luck turned around. The irony was staggering. After years of receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in family support, while I got nothing after mocking my modest wedding and questioning my life choices, Derek was asking me to bail him out of problems created by his own reckless behavior. The golden child who could do no wrong was standing in a community center drunk and desperate, begging his forgotten brother for salvation. 3 weeks after our honeymoon in Rocky Mountain National Park, I walked out to our apartment parking lot on a Tuesday morning and found an empty space where my Honda Civic should have been. My first thought was disbelief, followed quickly by the sinking realization that someone had stolen the car I'd worked so hard to buy and maintain. I called the police, immediately filed a report, and spent the morning dealing with insurance paperwork, while Sarah drove me to my construction site. The security footage from our apartment complex told a different story than random theft. When the property manager reviewed the recordings with me that afternoon, we watched Derek using a spare key to unlock my car at 2:15 in the morning. He moved with confidence and familiarity, suggesting this wasn't his first unauthorized use of my vehicle. The timestamp showed he'd taken the car while Sarah and I were both sound asleep, completely unaware that my own brother was stealing my transportation. I had given Derek that spare key 2 years earlier during a family emergency when his car wouldn't start and he needed to get to work. Like many trusting gestures in our family, it had been forgotten by me and apparently stored away by him for future convenience. Watching him on the security footage, I realized this betrayal had been planned, not impulsive. He knew exactly where to find the key and how to disable the alarm system. When I called Derek to confront him about the theft, he answered with practiced casualness and immediately launched into a story about his car being in the shop and needing transportation for an important job interview. He claimed he'd tried to call me, but my phone went straight to voicemail, so he'd made the decision to borrow the car rather than miss this career opportunity. His explanation sounded rehearsed and hollow, full of convenient details that couldn't be verified. Derek promised to return the car within a few hours just as soon as his interview concluded, and he could arrange alternative transportation. He acted as if taking someone's vehicle without permission was a minor inconvenience rather than a serious crime, suggesting that brothers should be willing to help each other out in emergency situations. His tone carried a hint of annoyance, as if I was being unreasonable by questioning his actions. My parents' reaction to the theft revelation was swift and predictable. Within an hour of my confrontation with Derek, Patricia called to lecture me about family loyalty and the importance of supporting each other during difficult times. She explained that Derek was going through a challenging period and needed understanding rather than legal threats. She reminded me that families stick together through adversity, and that involving the police would damage relationships permanently. Richard's approach was more aggressive, calling Derek's actions borrowing between brothers and suggesting that my reaction was disproportionate to the situation. He pointed out that Derek had no intention of permanently taking the vehicle and that I was creating unnecessary drama by treating a family matter like a criminal case. He threatened consequences if I continued pursuing legal action against my own brother. Hours turned into days with no communication from Derek and no returned vehicle. Sarah and I were forced to rely on expensive rideshare services for transportation, to work, depleting our small emergency fund that we'd built so carefully after the wedding expenses. Sarah had to rearrange her nursing shifts to accommodate my construction schedule, creating stress in her workplace and affecting patient care continuity. By the third day, I filed an official police report for vehicle theft, providing the security footage as evidence of Derek's crime. The responding officer explained that family relationships didn't exempt someone from theft charges, and that unauthorized use of a vehicle was prosecutable regardless of blood relations. The report would create a paper trail that could be used in court if Derek didn't return the car immediately. My parents' fury at my decision to involve law enforcement was immediate and intense. Patricia called, crying hysterically about how I was destroying the family and turning brother against brother over a simple misunderstanding. She painted Derek as a victim of my vindictive nature, and herself as a heartbroken mother watching her children tear each other apart. Her emotional manipulation was designed to make me feel guilty for seeking justice. Richard took a more threatening approach, warning me about the consequences of making family disputes public and suggesting that my actions would have lasting effects on all our relationships. He implied that pursuing legal action against Derek would result in my complete ostracism from the family, including exclusion from future gatherings, holidays, and important events. His message was clear: protecting Derek was more important than acknowledging my rights. Angela immediately sided with our parents, posting cryptic social media messages about toxic siblings who choose revenge over reconciliation, and people who destroy families for attention. Her Instagram stories featured quotes about forgiveness and moving past minor disagreements, clearly aimed at painting me as the unreasonable party in the conflict. Her followers responded with supportive comments about the importance of family unity and the destructiveness of holding grudges. Extended family members began choosing sides based on incomplete information provided by my parents. Aunts and uncles who rarely contacted me suddenly started calling to suggest that I should consider Derek's difficult situation and find ways to work things out privately. They'd been told that Derek was going through personal struggles and that I was making matters worse by refusing to show compassion. The financial impact of Derek's theft extended far beyond transportation costs. I needed my car to travel between construction sites, and the inability to arrive on time was affecting my work performance and reputation with supervisors. Sarah's nursing schedule became increasingly complicated as she tried to accommodate both our transportation needs, sometimes forcing her to work double shifts to make up for missed hours. Our carefully planned budget fell apart under the strain of unexpected expenses. Rideshare costs consumed money we'd allocated for groceries, utilities, and debt payments. The emergency fund we'd built through months of careful saving disappeared within a week, leaving us financially vulnerable and emotionally exhausted. What Derek had characterized as a simple borrowing situation was destroying our stability and future planning. When Derek finally surfaced after 3 days of silence, he claimed the car had developed serious mechanical problems and was currently at a repair shop waiting for parts. However, he couldn't provide the shop's name, location, or contact information, claiming he'd lost the paperwork in his confusion about the vehicle troubles. His story fell apart under basic questioning, revealing layers of deception. Detective Morrison's phone call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was operating a concrete mixer at a downtown construction site. His voice was professional but grave as he explained that Derek had been involved in a serious accident while driving under the influence. The crash had occurred at the intersection of Hampton Avenue and University Boulevard, one of Denver's busiest crossings during evening rush hour traffic. The other vehicle contained Jennifer Martinez, a 32-year-old single mother, and her two young children, 7-year-old Isabella and 5-year-old Miguel. Jennifer worked as a medical technician at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital and was driving home from picking up her children from their after-school program when Derek ran a red light and slammed into their compact sedan at 45 miles per hour. The impact had been devastating. Jennifer suffered broken ribs and internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. Isabella had a fractured arm and severe concussion that kept her unconscious for 6 hours, while doctors monitored for brain swelling. Miguel's leg fractures would require months of physical therapy, and the emotional trauma of watching his mother and sister hurt was manifesting in nightmares and anxiety attacks. Derek's blood alcohol level measured .14, nearly twice the legal limit, and this wasn't his first offense. Detective Morrison informed me that Derek had 2 previous DUI convictions, that my parents had somehow managed to keep quiet, probably through expensive legal representation and community connections. This third offense, combined with the serious injuries he'd caused, meant Derek was facing 15 to 25 years in prison. The detective's most shocking revelation came at the end of our conversation. Derek had fled the scene immediately after the crash, leaving the Martinez family bleeding in their destroyed car, while he'd disappeared into Denver traffic. Witnesses had provided the license plate number of my Honda Civic, which led police directly to my door and started an investigation that would soon consume my life. Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital became the epicenter of a moral crisis that would define my relationship with my family forever. I drove there immediately after Detective Morrison's call, finding Jennifer Martinez fighting for her life in the intensive care unit, while her children recovered in the pediatric wing. The sterile smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the human suffering that Derek's selfish choices had created. Jennifer's condition was critical but stable after 8 hours of surgery to repair internal bleeding and reset broken ribs. Her sister Maria sat beside the bed holding her hand and whispering prayers in Spanish, while monitors tracked every heartbeat and breath. Maria explained that Jennifer was raising Isabella and Miguel alone after their father died in a construction accident 3 years earlier, working double shifts at the hospital to provide for her children's needs. Isabella remained unconscious from her concussion, surrounded by machines monitoring brain activity and intracranial pressure. Her small arm was encased in a bright purple cast that nurses had decorated with stickers to make her smile when she woke up. The 7-year-old's dark hair spread across the pillow like a halo, making her look even younger and more vulnerable than her age suggested. Miguel was awake but clearly traumatized, asking repeatedly for his mother and sister while nurses tried to comfort him. His leg fractures required surgery and would need pins and screws to heal properly, meaning months of wheelchairs, crutches, and physical therapy. The 5-year-old kept asking when they could go home, not understanding why his family was suddenly broken and scattered across different hospital rooms. The medical bills were already climbing toward $100,000 with no end in sight. Jennifer's insurance would cover basic treatment, but the family faced devastating financial consequences from lost work time, ongoing therapy needs, and the long-term effects of their injuries. Maria explained that Jennifer's employer was being supportive, but medical technician salaries couldn't absorb this kind of catastrophic expense. Derek's criminal situation became clearer as Detective Morrison explained the charges during our hospital meeting. This was his 3rd DUI offense in 5 years, with previous incidents in 2019 and 2021 that had been quietly resolved through plea bargains and family connections. Colorado's habitual offender laws meant this conviction would carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years, with the possibility of 25 years depending on the severity of injuries he'd caused. The vehicular assault charges were even more serious due to Derek's decision to flee the scene. Leaving injured victims without rendering aid elevated the crime from a tragic mistake to deliberate callousness, demonstrating a level of selfishness that would influence sentencing recommendations. His blood alcohol level and the severity of injuries virtually guaranteed a conviction if he was captured and tried. My parents called an emergency family meeting for that evening, summoning Angela from Los Angeles and demanding my immediate presence at their house. The tone of Patricia's voice carried a desperation I'd never heard before, while Richard's instructions were delivered with military precision. They presented this gathering as a crisis management session, requiring complete family unity and decisive action. The meeting took place in our childhood living room, where family photos showcased decades of Derek's achievements and Angela's milestones, while I remained largely absent from the displayed memories. Patricia had been crying for hours, her makeup smeared and her usual composure completely shattered. Richard sat stiffly in his recliner, looking like a general preparing for battle against overwhelming odds. Their proposal was delivered with shocking directness. They wanted me to confess to driving the car during the accident, claiming Derek had never taken it in the first place. According to their plan, I would tell police that I'd been drinking and driving when the crash occurred, accepting full responsibility for the injuries and facing the criminal consequences. They argued this sacrifice would save Derek's future while preserving the family's reputation in the community. The justifications they offered revealed the depth of their delusion about Derek's worth versus mine. Patricia explained tearfully that Derek had so much potential and so many dreams that prison would destroy everything he could accomplish in life. She painted him as a sensitive soul who'd made a mistake during a difficult period, suggesting that his artistic nature and entrepreneurial spirit made him too valuable to waste in the criminal justice system. Richard approached the proposal from a business perspective, arguing that Derek's future earning potential and community connections made him more valuable to society than my construction career. He suggested that I was stronger and more resilient, better equipped to handle prison time and rebuild my life afterward. His cost-benefit analysis treated human lives like corporate assets, with Derek representing a higher return on investment. They offered $25,000 as compensation for my confession, presenting it as generous payment for a few years of inconvenience, rather than acknowledgement of the lifelong consequences I'd face. Patricia emphasized that this money would give Sarah and me a fresh start when I was eventually released, as if prison time was just a temporary setback rather than a life-destroying experience. Angela supported the plan, enthusiastically arguing that I owed the family this sacrifice after years of being difficult and uncooperative. She reminded everyone of my wedding's embarrassment and suggested that taking responsibility for Derek's accident would finally prove my family loyalty. Her Instagram influencer mindset treated the situation like a public relations crisis that required strategic management rather than honest accountability. The manipulation tactics escalated throughout the evening as my parents realized I wasn't immediately agreeing to their insane proposal. Patricia's tears became more dramatic, with wailing about losing her baby boy and watching the family fall apart. She blamed herself for raising children who couldn't support each other, suggesting that my refusal to help Derek proved her failure as a mother. Richard's threats became more specific and menacing, warning about the consequences of refusing to save Derek from his predicament. He implied that my construction career would suffer through his business connections, that my reputation in the community would be destroyed through whisper campaigns, and that my marriage to Sarah would crumble under the pressure of family ostracism. Extended family members were recruited to pressure me through phone calls and visits, each delivering slightly different versions of the same message: Derek's future was too important to sacrifice. I was the strongest family member and could handle adversity best, and true loyalty meant making personal sacrifices for the greater good. Aunts, who rarely spoke to me, suddenly became concerned about family unity, while uncles shared stories about brothers who'd supported each other through difficult times. Sarah's reaction to the family's proposal was immediate and absolute horror, followed by rage, followed by determination to protect our future together. She couldn't believe that anyone would suggest such a grotesque solution, pointing out that the plan was not only morally bankrupt, but also legally impossible to execute successfully. Modern police investigations included forensic evidence, witness testimony, and digital records that would expose any attempt at deception. Sarah reminded me that Derek had already fled the scene, making him a fugitive whose capture was inevitable given current surveillance technology and interstate cooperation between law enforcement agencies. His absence from the hospital, his failure to report the accident, and his history of avoiding responsibility all created evidence that no confession could overcome. More importantly, Sarah helped me understand that accepting responsibility for Derek's crime would destroy not just my life, but also our future together. Prison time would mean years of separation, devastating financial consequences, and a criminal record that would affect employment opportunities forever. The family that was asking for this sacrifice had never shown me love or support, making their demands even more outrageous. The final shock came when Derek disappeared from the hospital after learning about the charges he faced. Security footage showed him leaving through a service exit during a shift change, wearing scrubs he'd apparently stolen from a supply closet. Within hours, his credit cards were being used at locations heading south toward the Mexican border, suggesting a planned escape that had been prepared in advance. Derek's flight from justice proved that he'd never intended to face consequences for his actions, making the family's request for my sacrifice even more insulting. He was willing to let me go to prison for his crimes while he started a new life in another country, demonstrating the same selfishness that had defined our relationship since childhood. The golden child was abandoning everyone to save himself. Derek's escape triggered a multi-state manhunt that turned my life into a nightmare of police interviews, media attention, and family manipulation. FBI agents joined the investigation due to interstate flight charges, and suddenly my modest apartment became a hub of law enforcement activity. Detective Morrison explained that Derek's disappearance elevated the case from local DUI to federal fugitive investigation, bringing resources and attention that made capture inevitable. The escape plan revealed months of preparation and family complicity that shocked even me. Bank records showed Derek had been systematically emptying his accounts for weeks, converting assets to cash and cryptocurrency that would be difficult to trace across international borders. He'd purchased fake identification documents using contacts from previous legal troubles, demonstrating a level of criminal sophistication that suggested this wasn't his first escape attempt. Most devastating was the discovery that my parents had been secretly funding Derek's flight preparations. Richard had liquidated business investments and withdrawn retirement funds to provide escape money, while Patricia had sold jewelry and family heirlooms to create an untraceable cash reserve. They'd known about Derek's plans while demanding that I confess to his crimes, making their manipulation even more calculated and cruel. The fake identification Derek used was professionally manufactured, not an amateur production indicating connections to serious criminal organizations. FBI agent Catherine Walsh explained that Derek had likely been working with document forgers who specialized in helping fugitives disappear, requiring advanced planning and significant financial resources. The sophistication of his escape suggested this contingency had been prepared for years. Derek's flight path took him through Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas, with confirmed sightings at gas stations and motels along Interstate 25. Security cameras captured images of him using different names and appearances, showing a level of preparation that included hair dye, facial hair modifications, and clothing changes designed to confuse identification efforts. Each confirmed location brought the search closer to the Mexican border and international complications. The legal implications of Derek's escape created new problems for my situation. Because the car was registered in my name, insurance companies initially refused coverage for the accident, claiming unauthorized use voided the policy. The Martinez family's medical bills became my potential responsibility through civil liability, threatening financial ruin that would follow me for decades regardless of criminal charges. My parents' betrayal deepened as the investigation revealed the extent of their deception. Phone records showed hundreds of calls between Richard and Derek during the weeks before the accident, suggesting coordination that went far beyond normal family communication. Patricia had been researching international wire transfer services and foreign currency exchange rates, clearly preparing to support Derek's escape, rather than encouraging him to face responsibility. The expensive attorney my parents hired wasn't working to clear Derek's name or negotiate a plea bargain. Instead, he was researching extradition treaties and international law enforcement cooperation agreements. His expertise in international criminal law made no sense for defending a local DUI case unless escape had always been the intended strategy. They were paying top dollar to help Derek avoid justice while refusing to help me defend against false accusations. My workplace became increasingly hostile as news of the investigation spread through the construction community. Supervisors questioned my reliability and character, wondering if someone involved in such serious criminal investigations could be trusted with expensive equipment and safety-sensitive responsibilities. Co-workers treated me with suspicion and distance, unsure whether I was a victim or accomplice in Derek's crimes. The media attention brought unwanted scrutiny to every aspect of my life. Local news stations featured stories about the manhunt with my photo alongside Derek's, creating confusion about my role in events. Patricia had been providing interviews that painted Derek as a troubled young man who'd made mistakes while portraying me as an unforgiving brother who'd chosen revenge over reconciliation. Richard used his business connections to launch a whisper campaign designed to destroy my credibility as a potential witness against Derek. Former clients and professional associates received calls suggesting that I was unreliable, vindictive, and motivated by jealousy rather than justice. His strategy was to discredit my testimony before Derek was captured and tried. The community pressure became overwhelming as neighbors and acquaintances chose sides based on incomplete information. Patricia's version of events painted Derek as a victim of circumstances beyond his control, while characterizing me as someone who'd abandoned family loyalty for personal gain. Church members, school friends, and business associates received carefully crafted stories designed to build sympathy for Derek and suspicion of my motives. Sarah faced harassment at work as hospital staff learned about her connection to the case through media coverage. Colleagues questioned her judgment in marrying someone whose family was involved in such serious criminal activity, and supervisors worried about the hospital's reputation being affected by association. Her nursing career that she'd built through years of education and dedication was suddenly under threat because of Derek's crimes. Our marriage bore incredible strain under the pressure of constant scrutiny and financial stress. The romance and optimism of our recent wedding felt like distant memories as we dealt with police interviews, legal consultations, and media intrusions into our private life. Sarah remained steadfastly supportive, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes and feel the weight of uncertainty about our future. The financial devastation continued mounting as legal fees, lost work time, and increased living expenses consumed our savings. Sarah took on additional nursing shifts to compensate for my reduced construction hours, working exhausting schedules that left little time for emotional support or relationship maintenance. The modest life we'd built together was crumbling under circumstances completely beyond our control. Anonymous threats began appearing on social media and in voicemail messages suggesting that Derek had supporters who blamed me for his predicament. The messages referenced specific details about our daily routines and favorite locations, indicating surveillance or information gathering that made us feel unsafe in our own home. Police recommended security precautions that further disrupted our normal life. Extended family members revealed their true loyalties as the investigation progressed. Aunts and uncles, who'd initially seemed sympathetic, began distancing themselves from Sarah and me while expressing continued support for Derek. Family gatherings and holiday celebrations became impossible as every relative chose sides in a conflict that had consumed our entire social network. The discovery that my parents had been secretly liquidating assets to fund Derek's escape while simultaneously trying to convince me to confess to his crimes represented a level of betrayal that redefined my understanding of family relationships. They'd been willing to destroy my life to protect his, while actively helping him flee justice, demonstrating that their love had always been conditional and their priorities had never included my well-being. Bank records revealed the true scope of their financial support for Derek's escape plans. Richard had withdrawn $230,000 from business accounts and retirement investments, while Patricia had liquidated family heirlooms, jewelry, and collectibles worth approximately $50,000. The total amount they'd provided for Derek's flight from justice was nearly $300,000 more money than they'd ever offered me for any legitimate purpose. The most devastating revelation came when FBI agent Walsh discovered that Derek had been planning this escape for over a year, using family resources to establish international bank accounts and safe houses. My parents hadn't been responding to an emergency. They'd been supporting a premeditated strategy to avoid accountability for future crimes. Derek had known he would eventually face serious legal consequences and had prepared his family to help him escape justice. The realization that Derek's theft of my car hadn't been impulsive, but rather part of a larger criminal plan, changed everything about the situation. He'd specifically chosen my vehicle because it would implicate me while providing cover for his escape, demonstrating a level of calculating betrayal that went beyond sibling rivalry into genuine criminal conspiracy. My own family had been willing to sacrifice my freedom to protect his. The family dinner that would destroy our relationships forever began with Patricia's desperate phone call demanding an emergency meeting at the childhood home where Derek's achievements still lined the walls like shrines to golden child supremacy. Her voice carried hysteria, barely held in check as she insisted that Sarah and I attend this crucial family gathering. Richard's follow-up call was more threatening, suggesting that my absence would be interpreted as final proof of my disloyalty to the family unit. Angela flew in from Los Angeles specifically for this confrontation, bringing her Instagram photographer to document what she apparently believed would be my emotional breakdown and eventual capitulation. Her social media had been building toward this moment for weeks, with cryptic posts about family loyalty tests and people who choose strangers over blood relatives. Her followers were primed for content about toxic siblings and the importance of unconditional family support. The dining room had been transformed into a courtroom where I was clearly the defendant facing a jury of blood relatives who'd already reached their verdict. Patricia had prepared an elaborate meal featuring Derek's favorite dishes, as if the memory of his preferences could somehow guilt me into sacrificing my freedom for his escape. His empty chair had been set with full place settings and decorated with fresh flowers, creating a memorial atmosphere that suggested he was dead rather than fugitive. Family photos covered every available surface, showcasing decades of Derek's accomplishments, while my achievements remained conspicuously absent from the displayed memories. His high school graduation dominated the mantelpiece, his college degree hung prominently above the fireplace, and his wedding album lay open on the coffee table. The visual message was clear: this family had one son worth celebrating, and it wasn't me. Extended family members filled every seat around the dinner table, including aunts, uncles, and cousins who rarely attended normal gatherings, but had been summoned for this intervention. Each face wore expressions of grim determination, mixed with rehearsed sympathy, suggesting that talking points had been distributed in advance. Their presence was designed to create overwhelming pressure through sheer numbers and unified opposition. Sarah's inclusion in the invitation had been strategic rather than welcoming, intended to force her to witness my humiliation and hopefully convince her to pressure me toward compliance. Patricia had specifically requested that Sarah attend because wives need to understand family obligations, and marriage means supporting your husband's difficult decisions. The implication was clear: a good wife would encourage her husband to sacrifice himself for the greater family good. The conversation began with forced pleasantries and carefully orchestrated reminiscences about Derek's childhood kindness and generosity. Patricia shared stories about his willingness to share toys and help with household chores, painting a picture of selfless sacrifice that conveniently ignored his adult pattern of taking from others. Richard contributed business anecdotes about Derek's natural leadership abilities and entrepreneurial instincts that had impressed clients and colleagues. Angela presented a slideshow of Derek's social media highlights, showcasing his charitable activities and community involvement, while carefully editing out evidence of his drinking problems and irresponsible behavior. Her presentation was professionally prepared, with music and transitions treating Derek's life like a marketing campaign designed to sell his value to potential investors. Every slide reinforced the narrative that society was losing someone special while gaining nothing from my freedom. The direct attack on my character began when Richard questioned my motivations for refusing to help Derek escape consequences for his moment of poor judgment. He suggested that years of jealousy and resentment had finally found an outlet in this crisis, allowing me to punish Derek for being more successful and beloved. His psychological analysis portrayed my desire for justice as evidence of deep-seated mental health issues rather than normal moral reasoning. Patricia's emotional manipulation reached new heights as she described Derek's sensitive nature and inability to survive harsh prison conditions. She painted vivid pictures of violence and abuse that would destroy his gentle spirit, contrasting his vulnerability with my supposed toughness and resilience. Her tears were carefully timed and dramatically delivered, designed to make me feel responsible for Derek's future suffering, rather than acknowledging his responsibility for creating the situation. The family's coordinated assault included specific accusations about my wedding's embarrassment, my career's limitations, and my marriage's questionable foundation. They suggested that taking responsibility for Derek's accident would finally prove my worth to the family while giving Sarah a husband she could be proud of. The logic was twisted, but delivered with conviction, as if sacrificing my freedom was actually an opportunity for personal growth and family redemption. Cousin Marcus, who had been my only family ally, revealed that he'd been pressured to withdraw his support through threats to his own career and social standing. His small business depended on family connections and community relationships that Richard could easily destroy through his professional network. Marcus apologized with tears in his eyes, explaining that he couldn't risk his children's future to support my principles. The breaking point came when Angela presented social media evidence of community support for Derek, showing carefully curated posts from friends and acquaintances who believed the family's version of events. Her followers had created a social media campaign demanding justice for Derek while portraying me as the real villain in the situation. The online mob was calling for my confession and expressing sympathy for Derek's family during this difficult time. Years of suppressed rage finally erupted as I stood up from the dinner table and began recounting the detailed history of financial inequality, emotional abuse, and systematic favoritism that had defined my entire life. I pulled out bank statements, credit reports, and financial records that documented every dollar given to my siblings while I received nothing. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, showing patterns of discrimination that had lasted for decades. I revealed Derek's theft of my identity for credit card fraud, producing documentation that proved his criminal behavior extended far beyond the car accident. The evidence showed systematic financial abuse that had been damaging my credit and future prospects, while my parents dismissed my concerns as paranoia and jealousy. Derek hadn't just stolen my car. He'd been stealing my financial identity for years. The phone recordings I'd made of my parents' conversations about Derek's escape plans played clearly through the dining room speakers, capturing their detailed discussions about liquidating assets and coordinating international wire transfers. Patricia's voice could be heard researching extradition treaties while Richard discussed hiring criminal defense attorneys who specialized in fugitive cases. Their own words proved their complicity in Derek's flight from justice. Text message screenshots displayed months of coordination between Derek and our parents, showing advanced planning for escape scenarios that predated the accident by considerable time. The messages revealed that Derek had been preparing to flee the country whenever his criminal behavior finally caught up with him, using family resources to establish safe houses and foreign bank accounts. This hadn't been an emergency response. It had been a premeditated conspiracy. The security footage from Derek's apartment complex showed him deliberately planning the car theft, including reconnaissance trips to determine my schedule and prepare his escape route. The recordings proved that taking my vehicle was calculated rather than impulsive, designed to implicate me while providing cover for his flight. My own brother had set me up as a patsy for crimes he'd planned in advance. Financial records revealed the true scope of Derek's gambling debts and substance abuse costs, showing expenditures that far exceeded any legitimate business or personal expenses. Casino transactions, alcohol purchases, and cash withdrawals painted a picture of addiction and irresponsibility that explained why he'd needed to escape rather than face accountability. The golden child was actually a desperate criminal, running from multiple consequences. The bombshell evidence that silenced the entire family was documentation of Derek's previous accidents and criminal activities that had been covered up through expensive legal representation and family connections. Police reports, court records, and insurance claims showed a pattern of reckless behavior dating back to high school, with each incident being quietly resolved through financial settlements and legal maneuvering. Derek's history included hit-and-run accidents, public intoxication arrests, assault charges, and property destruction that had cost the family hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and settlements. The pattern showed escalating criminal behavior that made the Martinez family accident an inevitable consequence rather than an isolated mistake. Derek hadn't made one poor decision. He'd been making criminal choices for over a decade while the family covered up the evidence. Patricia's response to the evidence was immediate denial, followed by accusations that I'd been spying on the family and violating their privacy. She characterized the recordings and documentation as proof of my vindictive nature rather than evidence of their criminal conspiracy. Richard threatened legal action against me for invasion of privacy, as if exposing their crimes was worse than committing them in the first place. Angela attempted to live-stream the confrontation for her social media followers, apparently believing that public pressure would force me to back down from my accusations. Her phone captured the family's shocked reactions to evidence they hadn't known I possessed, including their own incriminating conversations about helping Derek escape justice. The live-stream backfired when viewers began commenting about the family's obvious guilt and criminal behavior. The final devastating revelation was documentation showing that Derek had deliberately chosen my car for the accident because he believed it would make me a suspect while protecting his own identity. Text messages between Derek and gambling associates discussed using my vehicle as cover for criminal activities, treating me as an unwitting accomplice in schemes I knew nothing about. My brother had been planning to destroy my life for months. The sound of car doors slamming in the driveway interrupted the family's desperate attempts to discredit my evidence. Through the dining room windows, we could see FBI agents and local police officers surrounding the house with official vehicles and serious expressions. Agent Walsh approached the front door with arrest warrants that had been sealed pending the completion of their investigation into the family's criminal conspiracy. Patricia and Richard were charged with aiding and abetting a fugitive obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud related to their assistance with Derek's escape. Angela faced charges for her role in coordinating the social media disinformation campaign designed to discredit witnesses and interfere with the investigation. The Golden Child family was finally facing consequences for their years of criminal behavior and moral corruption. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching justice finally catch up with my family, as Derek was sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. The Golden Child who had terrorized the Martinez family and destroyed so many lives looked small and broken in his orange jumpsuit, no longer the charming manipulator who had convinced everyone that rules didn't apply to him. Judge Elizabeth Harrison's words about the severity of his crimes and the pattern of escalating criminal behavior echoed through the courtroom like final judgment on decades of enabling and privilege. Derek's capture had come at the border crossing in Laredo, Texas, where sophisticated facial recognition technology identified him despite plastic surgery and extensive efforts to alter his appearance. FBI agents found him carrying $240,000 in cash, multiple fake passports, and detailed plans for establishing a new identity in Central America. His arrest made national news as an example of how modern law enforcement technology makes escape impossible for even well-funded fugitives. The trial revealed the full extent of Derek's criminal history, including previously unknown incidents that stretched back to high school. Prosecutors presented evidence of hit-and-run accidents, assault charges, fraud schemes, and substance abuse problems that had been systematically covered up by family money and legal manipulation. Each revelation destroyed another piece of the Golden Child mythology that had dominated our household for 30 years. Jennifer Martinez testified from a wheelchair about the ongoing effects of her injuries, including chronic pain, reduced mobility, and the emotional trauma of watching her children suffer. Her voice was strong but haunted as she described months of surgery, physical therapy, and financial hardship caused by Derek's selfish choices. The contrast between her dignity and Derek's self-pity was stark and powerful. Isabella, now 8 years old, had recovered physically from her injuries but still struggled with nightmares and anxiety about car travel. Her testimony was delivered through closed-circuit television to protect her from additional trauma, but her words about missing school and being afraid to leave home brought tears to everyone in the courtroom. The psychological damage Derek had caused would affect this brave little girl for years to come. Miguel, now 6, required ongoing physical therapy for his leg injuries, but had shown remarkable resilience in adapting to his limitations. His mother's strength had helped him process the trauma in healthy ways, and his questions about why someone would hurt his family demonstrated wisdom beyond his years. The Martinez children's courage in facing their new reality made Derek's self-absorption even more disgusting. My parents' sentencing had taken place 2 weeks earlier in a different courtroom, where they faced the consequences of their conspiracy to aid Derek's escape from justice. Richard received 18 months in federal prison for his role in financing and coordinating the fugitive operation, while Patricia was sentenced to house arrest and community service for her participation in the cover-up. Their business and social standing in the community was completely destroyed. The asset forfeiture proceedings had been swift and comprehensive, with the government seizing nearly everything my parents owned to compensate Derek's victims and cover the costs of his capture. Their house was sold at auction, retirement accounts were liquidated, and business investments were converted to cash for restitution payments. The financial empire Richard had built over decades disappeared in a matter of months. Angela's legal troubles were less severe but equally devastating to her carefully constructed social media persona. She received probation and community service for her role in the disinformation campaign, but the real punishment came from the complete destruction of her online reputation. Brands canceled sponsorship deals, followers abandoned her accounts, and the Instagram influencer career she'd built with family money collapsed under the weight of public disgust. The irony was perfect. Angela, who had built her identity around social media success and public approval, was now universally recognized as complicit in covering up serious crimes. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation through apology posts and charity work only generated more criticism and skepticism. The platform that had once provided validation and income became a constant reminder of her moral failures. My vindication in the community was complete and satisfying, with neighbors, co-workers, and acquaintances apologizing for believing Patricia's lies and supporting Derek's narrative. The construction company where I worked offered me a promotion and public commendation for my integrity throughout the crisis. Local media interviewed me as an example of someone who chose justice over family loyalty when faced with an impossible situation. The insurance settlement for emotional distress and defamation exceeded my expectations, providing financial security that would protect Sarah and me from future crises. More importantly, the legal victory established clear boundaries that would prevent any family member from involving us in their future schemes or manipulations. The golden child's reign of terror was officially over. Sarah and I used the settlement money to purchase our first home, a modest but beautiful house, in a neighborhood where our children could grow up safely and loved unconditionally. The down payment ceremony felt like a celebration of everything we'd built together through honesty, hard work, and mutual respect. Our marriage had not only survived the crisis but emerged stronger and more committed than ever before. The Martinez family became unexpected friends rather than legal adversaries, bonding over our shared experience of Derek's destructiveness and our mutual commitment to preventing future tragedies. Jennifer's strength and grace in handling her family's trauma inspired Sarah and me to become advocates for drunk driving victims and supporters of stronger criminal justice penalties for repeat offenders. Isabella and Miguel's recovery process taught us about resilience and the importance of surrounding children with love and support during difficult times. Sarah's nursing background helped her connect with their medical needs, while my construction skills allowed me to help make their home more accessible during Jennifer's recovery. These relationships enriched our lives in ways that family connections never had. The community service work we began during the legal proceedings became a permanent part of our lives, with Sarah and I volunteering at victim advocacy centers and speaking at schools about the consequences of drunk driving. Our message about choosing responsibility over loyalty resonated with young people facing pressure to cover up for friends or family members making dangerous choices. Cousin Marcus eventually reached out to apologize for withdrawing his support during the crisis, explaining the threats his family had faced and asking for forgiveness. His business had actually improved after severing ties with Richard's corrupt network, and he'd learned that integrity was more profitable than family connections built on deception. We rebuilt our relationship slowly, but genuinely. The therapy I pursued to process decades of family trauma helped me understand that the abuse and favoritism I'd experienced weren't my fault or failure. Dr. Sarah Chen's guidance taught me to recognize healthy relationship patterns and establish boundaries that would protect my future family from toxic influences. The emotional healing was as important as the legal victory in creating space for genuine happiness. Sarah and I began planning for our own family, excited about the opportunity to raise children with equality, respect, and unconditional love. Our parenting philosophy would be built on encouraging individual talents while ensuring that every child felt valued and supported. The contrast with my childhood would be deliberate and profound. The life lesson that emerged from this devastating experience was both simple and transformative. True family is chosen through love and respect, rather than imposed through biology and obligation. The people who truly cared about my well-being had supported me through the crisis, while those who demanded my sacrifice had revealed their selfishness and moral bankruptcy. Financial independence and emotional freedom allowed Sarah and me to create the life we'd always wanted, surrounded by people who valued our happiness and success. The modest wedding that my family had mocked became the foundation for a marriage built on partnership and equality rather than hierarchy and favoritism. Every day together felt like a gift that we'd earned through surviving the worst possible test of our commitment. The final court documents arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while Sarah and I were painting the nursery for our first child. Derek's appeals had been exhausted. My parents' restitution payments were complete, and Angela's probation would end in 6 months, with no possibility of contact with our family. The legal system had provided closure that family relationships never could. Derek would spend the next 15 years in a maximum security federal prison, where his charm and manipulation tactics would be useless among inmates who understood real consequences for criminal behavior. His earliest possible release date would come when he was 45 years old, with no family money, no social connections, and no golden child privilege to smooth his path back into society. As I watched Sarah arrange baby clothes in the dresser we'd built together, I realized that the greatest gift my toxic family had given me was the motivation to build something completely different for the people I truly loved. Their cruelty and favoritism had taught me exactly how not to treat children partners or anyone seeking love and acceptance. The baby growing inside Sarah would never experience conditional love, financial inequality, or emotional manipulation designed to pit siblings against each other. Our children would know that family means protection, support, and celebration of individual achievements rather than comparison, competition, and sacrifice for someone else's benefit. Sometimes the most profound healing comes from breaking toxic cycles and creating the loving environment you always deserved. The family that rejected me for choosing justice over loyalty had freed me to build relationships based on genuine care and mutual respect. Their abandonment was actually liberation. What experiences have you had with toxic family dynamics, or choosing between loyalty and doing what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know how you've dealt with family members who expected you to sacrifice your well-being for their benefit. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to show your support for people who choose integrity over enabling. Subscribe for more stories about standing up to toxic behavior and building healthy relationships from difficult circumstances. Share this with anyone who might need encouragement to set boundaries with family members who don't respect their choices or values. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting others who face similar challenges. Remember that choosing justice and protecting innocent people is always the right decision, even when family pressure makes it feel impossible. I hope sharing my experience helps someone else find the courage to do what's right when everything around them is wrong. Take care of yourselves and the people who truly love you.